we're talking about work-life integration, but we treat the life part of things like life is a gift for getting your work done correctly or getting it done right. And we're doing this despite some of the horror stories we've heard about what happens when we're overworking ourselves. So Marissa Mayer, she was the CEO of Yahoo. I think that's what she's most famous for right now. And she was hours late for a dinner meeting because she overslept. And this is after she used to boast about how little sleep she needed. She could function on 3 hours of sleep a night. And she was 2 hours late for a very important meeting. Arianna Huffington is now the champion of sleep and napping. She came to that because she passed out and she broke her cheekbone while she was dropping to the floor. And so we don't need a wake-up call as traumatic as that. I don't know what I'd look like with unbalanced cheekbones. So today, we're here to talk about how important work-life integration is. It's not just important for us as individuals.
Maybe it's the CEO, maybe it's the managers, maybe it's other senior executives. Some may or may not really be able to wrap their heads around work-life fit. And because they have business challenges, they have the bottom line in mind. So you have to think about what are their business challenges. Maybe it's for HR, senior leaders in HR, it's retention, it's training, it's attracting talent. And for somebody in another business unit, maybe it's opening up a new office in China. You have to think about what their challenges are and then say, this is how work-life fit is going to help you meet your business challenges. So you have to speak their language. You have to learn what the priorities are of different business units and what their challenges are, what's keeping them up at night, and meet them where they are. And then once you can do that, it all comes together. And they say, oh, you've got a strategy for me to help me meet my goals? Great, bring it on.
For me, I would say that I think many of us don't realize the impact that we have. You may have only been in your career for a couple of years. You may not have a leader title, but I'm going to sound very corporate. You're all leaders in some way. So going back to my personal story of not having worked a weekend during busy season, I was an audit manager, so 6 or 7 years in. And it was the first time I was working for the senior manager. And I sort of led the team in that way. And that's what we started off with. We aren't working the weekend, but that's the basic expectation. And what should we do to get that done? So there's that, I would call grassroots level of leadership that you all can empower yourselves to live out. But of course there is the senior leadership, and I would echo Sarah, it's the business impact. And there clearly is an abundance of research that supports positive business outcomes tied to flexibility, work-life fit, well-being, happier employees, and more productive. There's loads of that out there. But I would say don't discount the power that you have, regardless of what level you're at, and the impact that you can make on the immediate culture around you.
Right. You've mentioned that you had your first audit season in New York. Your team didn't work weekends, and well, my burning question, right? It was an assumption, but also a question is: were you still able to meet your deadlines? Because yes. I think what would happen is, as you know, companies have cultures that have been established and have lasted for a long time, and I'm guessing that you'll probably come across leadership that will say, well, this is how it works. And how do we, how can we say to our employees, you don't work on the weekends when we have all these client deadlines to meet? And so I guess the question is around that with the business imperative is, is there a way or a place and space to show that it does work, apart from having everybody's boss call you to say, yes, it did work for my team?
Yeah, I think it's, some people like working on weekends. It's not me, but other people like it. Some people do. So I don't want to mandate no weekend work for everyone. And of course there's going to be the exception. But I find that particularly in audit and particularly in busy season, you go into it thinking, oh, it's going to be hell. Whatever those hours will be, whatever days there will be, I will not see any of my friends, I will not have any fun in my life for this period. And I find that's just completely ridiculous. So I think for too long, we just go into these busy periods expecting it to be the worst. So we make it be the worst. We live it out. Whereas I just came in not knowing any different and just planned the audit like I would ordinarily. And yes, we met the deadline with no issues. And yeah,
Okay.
no issues.
Yeah, but I think the business, you have to show the business impact, and I think the stats, if you can point to outside studies, so as I mentioned with PwC and a group called Imperative, we have a research paper, it's on our website, ccp.co. You can also find it on PwC and Imperative sites, but if you need stats, if that's what your senior leaders need to see,
Oh,
they
can
need
you
to
say
see.
the name of the report?
Oh, it's making work more meaningful. And because we at CCP, we always want to talk about the business case, and we have a list of outside resources. So it's not just us saying it would be nice to do. There is economic research to back this up, that people stay longer. They're either self-identified or identified by their managers as high performing or more sort of innovative. And there's health benefits. There's been a few different insurance companies that have done studies on self-reported happiness, changes in, positive changes in health, less health costs for companies. Aetna's done a lot of research around this. So there's a lot of data that you can find out there if that's what your senior leaders need to make a decision whether this is a good business practice.
Fantastic. We have a question.
I was wondering if you could just kind of like describe how it works in practice of not working weekends. Does it mean working 14 to 16 hours every other weekday, or how do you plan your engagements around not working weekends?
Well, it always begins with a discussion of what's most important to teams, because again, some people don't mind working weekends. So I don't want to mandate my preference to not work weekends on everyone else, which I think is part of the flexibility conversation. Because for some people, it's more important for them to go home and have dinner with their loved ones. So I don't want to require that on anyone. So it always begins with the team discussion of what's most important to everyone. Like what is your non-negotiable? In an ideal world, what would be your dream? And that's what I start with, and it sounds very corny, but that's the conversation that we would have. And then it's planning, it's good planning. I mean, yes, there will be emergencies that come up that haven't come up before. Maybe it's a restatement, or maybe it's the client pushes up the deadline, or whatever it may be. That, of course, will happen, but let that be the exception, not the expectation going in. Does that answer your question? Okay.
So how do you plan for, wrapping up your field work and wrapping up being with clients if you're at a new client every week? I mean, I don't know how it worked for you, but a lot of the staff that I manage, they're going from one client to the next client to the next client, and at times there's a domino effect if one of the clients don't provide the information. Mm-hmm. So they use the weekend to wrap everything up as much as they could. So how did your team go about that?
I guess that probably goes back, I would think about that in terms of upfront deployment. If you know that's going to happen, and if that's recurring year on year on year on year, why don't we think about including a buffer? So if you're going from a client 1 week after the other, and you know that's going to happen, you're going to have this overflow, why don't you at least allow coverage for half of your team, or at least two, whatever the right number is, to have a few days to respond to that overflow.
Right. I think part of that, right, is communication amongst management to make sure that that happens, and then also perhaps a bit of a culture shift, because I'm guessing one of the challenges is the sense that all time should be chargeable time, and if we create a buffer, we might lose charge. But I think this is where sort of management might wish to shift how they think, and managers on different jobs might speak to each other more about sort of how the stuff works. And as you mentioned, if it's a recurring issue, then it should be a conversation that's easier to have.
Right. Yeah.
And
one more thing hopefully the more practical that I would add is, I think particularly in professional services, we tend to bend over backwards and more and sideways and everything else to serve our clients. And I think our leaders, including you, at all levels, can do a better job of saying, is that necessary? Is that deadline absolutely necessary, or is that deadline critical? And or we do need this information by this date because our team won't be available to serve you. It's a hard conversation, and you can't have that with every client, obviously, and not every leader will support that because of relationship strategies and all of that, but we don't tend to go that route. We tend to say yes all the time without even thinking about it.
So I would just pinpoint that it's a cultural and strategic and purpose shift of an organization. You can't just say, we're not going to do this, or this is how we're going to be flexible. You have to think about it at the highest levels of, are we all bought into this? And what does this flexibility, offering this flexibility, what does it mean for our organization? I mean, for us, we had to make sure the technology was there. We had to make sure that people kept their Outlook calendars updated. I mean, some of it is minutia, but it really matters. We can't really have this fit if we don't know where we are. We're not going to be in the office, so where is somebody? Are they available to talk right now? I mean, we are in client service too. We are advising our companies, so we had to maintain that, the general hours of work so that we would be available for our companies. But we couldn't just make these small changes. They had to be at the highest level of what does this mean for our strategy and how we work with our companies.
I think if a thing that happens when we're talking about issues like diversity or work-life fit is because they're not a direct sort of bottom line impact. We're having a discussion about like, well, why should we do it because it's working, and what's important here is like sort of measuring metrics. But then a question is like, what are you measuring? Are we measuring like quantitative? Are you measuring qualitative? I mean, a piece of information that I read that was surprising for me to a certain extent is apparently when people work 50 hours a week, when people have a 50-hour week, they actually end up working about 38 of those hours. And as the number of hours you work in a week increases, your sort of percentage of time actually working decreases. And so, I mean, this is, for me, like a great argument for being able to have that life, I guess, to reset, because Cecilia mentioned the intoxication effects of a lack of sleep. But I just wanted to ask, like, what other metrics do people think about or talk about when they're talking about sort of the benefits of having this balance, fit, work life, loving life thing?
Well, I think, again, it goes back to the business impact. So we always tell our companies, think about your core KPIs. If it's going to matter to your business, it's got to fit into what you're already measuring and what you already care about and what already is seen as connected to the business results. So we think about, a lot of companies have people goals, whether it's retention or training or retaining or hiring. Think about that, and then think about maybe it's reskilling, retraining if you're going into an area of business. So again, just connect it, do what your business does best. You measure your key performance indicators, work it into that, weave it into that. And I think otherwise we have our, each team has its goals, each business unit has its goals, work it into that. Don't try to create these extra goals that you have to integrate into the culture or try to get people to understand. So I think metrics, again, if you want to show business impact, connect it to what you're already measuring. And then of course, if it's not getting measured, it won't matter to the company, it won't be a priority.
The one thing I'll add is that when we started this transformation journey, we started it with a firm-wide competition, and it was called the Habit Challenge. And basically we asked teams or staff and partners to form teams and commit to 2 daily well-being habits. And it could be anything. It could have been get 10,000 steps a day in. It could have been drink your recommended daily water intake. It could have been as simple as that, or it could have been put your device away for 30 minutes before bed. It could have been no emails after 10 p.m., et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we did that during January through April. So those of you who are in audit know that that's the busiest time. And that's intentional. That's why we chose to do it then. And we asked them to report back to us what impact it had. And the positive feedback was incredible, truly, 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 truly incredible. And a lot of it was quantitative, but a lot of it was also very qualitative and very real because, I said earlier, clients noticed. So we had a lot of skeptics, particularly at the partner level, just because they thought this is another HR initiative, who cares? And they saw the difference in their teams. They would walk into the team room and notice that they weren't all half asleep looking depressed. You've all been there. I know it. Or you've walked past an audit room at least and seen it. But they saw the difference. And we had one of our audit partners told us that the client's CFO picked up the phone to call her to say, what are you doing differently with your teams? Because whatever you're doing, I want to do with my team. And that was enough. I mean, we can give all the numbers you want and all the extrapolations to reduction in turnover costs and all of that, which we had as well, and it's helpful. But we also had these very real quotes that people are noticing the difference. We also had partners say that their relationships with their staff improved, simply because they were, if they had a 10,000 step a day challenge, they'd develop this camaraderie and this friendly competition that they wouldn't have had otherwise. The book club team that I mentioned earlier, they still do it now, and their client has started to do it. And they meet monthly to discuss a book, and they said it was so powerful in removing the hierarchy between staff levels because they were talking about a book. And it didn't matter how many years of experience you had. Everyone had an interesting perspective. Everyone had a different perspective. So it helped with diversity and removing your blind spots and unconscious bias. But it brought them together. And psychological safety in the workplace is a whole nother conversation. But I think it does play a part here because if you feel comfortable enough to share your thoughts with your colleagues, you're far more happier and far more productive. And you're not wasting energy on pretending to be something you're not.
So you mentioned key performance indicators, and I was just wondering when we implement work-life balance or work-life fit into our firms, for our accounting firms, what are the leaders looking for when they look at their KPIs, just so we can kind of pitch this sort of thing and kind of develop that?
I can share with our launch, because we're about 18 months into it, we have a firm-wide people survey. I'm sure many of you do as well, just to check on how happy people are. And we added a question specific to the effort. So we call it Be Well, Work Well. And we added a question that said, my team leaders encourage Be Well, Work Well. And we wanted it to be that strong. It wasn't just my leaders know about Be Well, Work Well, or I feel like I can be well, work well. It was my leaders are encouraging it, because we've heard time and time again from our people at least that what they see is what is their reality. So if their leaders aren't doing it or aren't talking about it, then they're not going to feel like they can do it, regardless of what else is happening in the organization. So that was one KPI. Another one that they look at is engagement. So how engaged you are, and turnover. And one of the things, I talked about that, how we're trying to encourage behavior change, but we've tried to encourage behavior change while sharing the science and why we're doing this. It's not just to feel good. There's an abundance of science, I'm sure Sarah can confirm or attest, that there's an abundance of research out there, and it's fairly new science because a lot of it is neuroscientific, and we haven't had the technology until recently. But it's literally connecting how well you are, how hydrated you are, how sleep deprived you are, how often you move physically. It's connecting that to your brain function. So we share that science through firm-wide communications, but also through workshops. So we have a series of classroom workshops as well as virtual workshops. And so one of the other KPIs is, and we found a correlation between those people who go to these workshops tend to have higher engagement scores. So we found that.
What was the first?
Those who attend these workshops, have higher engagement scores. So we had that number. And we also were able to prove statistically that the people who go to these workshops are in teams that experienced lower turnover. So we were literally able to extrapolate that to a dollar amount.
That's fantastic. And I will add, I believe this is the case, right? PwC has a website now with the Habit Bank that if you're like with a client and they're like this, or if you're looking for ideas for your own firm, you could find this information there. Just because some people might be like, well, what do people do when they relax? And there is some guidance out there.
There is. Yes, thanks for bringing that up. It's, for those of you interested, it's at habitbank.pwc.com. And it's a repository of all those little things that I mentioned, like a monthly book club, or getting 10,000 steps a day, or putting your phone away for 30 minutes before you sleep. You will notice the difference, and it's not earth-shattering, but we don't do it. Right, so.
Right. I will personally testify because I have a wonderful friend who's very organized and put together this incredible spreadsheet that has all these suggestions of things to do, and it has helped me immensely sort of think about, because you often think that you're doing things, but if I, as you mentioned, putting things in a calendar and prioritizing it, if I think to myself, okay, I'm going to spend at least 15 minutes reading something that is not related to work, first it's hard, and then you remember that you actually enjoy doing those things, and it gets easier. But I mean, this is me. It's like there are all kinds of things that you can discover or rediscover and find that once you're making that time for that, actually when you go back to the other things, you're probably better at those things. A question that came up, and I think is probably a thought for us, is how do you make it real? How do you make this happen in your life, in your workspace, regardless of where you are in your career? So I'll start with you, Cecilia.
Okay, sure. So I talked about being in audit, and then I was in deals. When I was in deals, I traveled a lot. I spent 8 months in Mexico City. I flew every week, and I didn't have my green card, so that was really fun, coming into JFK on a Friday afternoon and literally wasting 6 hours of my life every single week. And they don't let you touch your device, so I couldn't be productive. It was 6 hours of standing. But so how I incorporate it is a very real example. In Mexico City, I started, and I invited my team to come with me, making my lunch. We went to the supermarket, bought a loaf of bread, bought some smoked salmon and an avocado. That became my lunch for a couple of days, because I can only eat so much of the other stuff, days on end. We also implemented, this is very candid, I'm very candid, in case you couldn't tell, but we implemented no wine Mondays, because we tended to drink a lot. And that's not doing much for my Australian reputation. But I share that to be very honest and to be very candid, because when you travel for work, you almost, you turn to vices that you wouldn't ordinarily when you're at home, because you feel like you need to reward yourself in some way. Does anyone feel that way?
Or working long hours.
Okay. Yep. Yeah. Okay. So I fell victim to that, and I'm not someone that drinks a lot, but you would, because you're away from home, so there's no one waiting for you. You don't have friends to meet up with, so you would go out as a team and, let's get a bottle of wine. And that became a recurring thing, which is not healthy. So little things like that is how I would try to make it real. I also started packing my food for the plane rides, so not to eat what's on the plane. There's a lot of articles out there, and not to speak poorly of any airline caterer, but what they put in the food is probably not the most nourishing, is how I'll sum it up. So I started packing, and it's not too long a flight, 5 hours, but I would pack some almonds that are dry roasted, unsalted, and I love them actually. But I would do things like that. I would pack a banana or bring an avocado with me, so that I know that I'm not eating poorly when I'm not even on my trip yet. So things like that. On a day-to-day basis, for those of you who don't travel and think that's irrelevant, I block my calendar a lot. That's become a relatively new trick, I will say. I block it for my lunch break, so that people won't even schedule anything at that time. So every day now, I schedule my lunch break as a recurring daily entry, and it goes indefinitely. And as as meetings come up that can't be moved, or they're with certain people that are hard to get, I will reschedule my lunch, but I'll always have at least half an hour, and that's very rare. I also tend to be upfront with whoever I'm having a meeting with. I will be honest and say I won't be in front of my computer then because I'll be walking my dog. Is that okay? Like, just let me know if I need my computer, because if so, then we'll find another time. So it's just sharing who you are, which is hard at first, really hard. But the more you do it, I feel like the people that you're interacting with will do it more often as well. And that's what helps start the culture change.
Right. I think what you've mentioned also is sort of setting boundaries and expectations. I notice it with you, and I know people talk about it. I haven't done it yet, but putting sometimes a response in your email so people don't expect you to respond in 5 minutes, because that stresses you out. I guess that's why you're holding your breath when you check your email to a certain extent. Or deciding that, like, after a certain point in time, you're not going to answer your work phone. And I'll tell you this, like, after a while, if people know they can't reach you after 10 p.m., they stop trying. They'll just call you tomorrow, because, I mean, unless you're doing a heart transplant, they can wait. So if any other tips about sort of making it real?
I think I would echo a lot of what you've said. It really, I think the Outlook calendar for us was central. As I said, to let your colleagues know where you're going to be. If you really want to be serious about this flexibility thing, you need to communicate still. It doesn't mean that you can just check out. So we noted, when I'm going to be working from home, when I'm going to be in the office. I think blocking a lot of time, because if someone, we can all see each other's calendars at my organization. So if it looks like an open day, it will get scheduled. So if I need time to work on a report, if I need to go to the doctor, if my daughter has an art show, I block it. And I really feel strongly about being honest with your colleagues too. I think we came from a culture where we just didn't share. We didn't really have a life. We just showed up at work and we were this sort of amorphous person without anything going on outside. So I think the more that we shared and said, people know that I have 2 kids, but I shared more and said, my son has a birthday party at his class today, and I'm going to go bring cupcakes. It just makes me seem more human. And then someone else, my colleagues, will share their stories, and it just becomes more accepted. And it's not something that you fault the employee for being away for an hour. You know that they have a life. So I think blocking time, being honest, and I also thought about what I needed. When we started the Work-Life Fit, our consultant just said, what are your goals? What do you need? And if it's working out or get into yoga a few more times a week, or eating better, it's block the time to go grocery shopping, block the time to do the cooking, and don't try to have 2 calendars. This woman, Callie, told us, have it all in one place so that it's integrated. If you want to fit it together, you've got to put it all in one place. I know there's some people try to do family calendars and work calendars. I put mine all in the same place. You can make things private if you don't want people to see what you're doing, but I can tell you that on Tuesday nights I have this, so I need to work from home. It just, bringing it all together for me made it finally fit, and it held me accountable, because I said, I'm going to go grocery shopping, I'm going to cook, I'm going to work out, I'm going to do this. It's there. And I would also block time for work things that I was getting behind in. We use Salesforce, and we need to track everything in Salesforce. And if I get a little behind, I block time to put things in Salesforce. I block time to focus on company responses. If there are core things that are part of your job that you're falling behind in, schedule it. And the same with your life. And I also just thought more broadly about my family. What does my family need? What do they need from me? What do I want to give back to them? And I thought about my husband's schedule, and if he wants to go biking, he's a cyclist during the summer, so I would work from home on the days he wanted to go cycling. And this makes a huge difference in my life, because I'm taking it all together. And I'm, when he's happier and healthier, our family's happier. So, and I think about my kids, and if they want to do karate, and it all comes together. It all is a package, and you can't look at it separately. So, Outlook was very helpful for that for me. And, there are lots of other tools out there, but I think find the one that you really love and stick to it.
Right. I think while the microphone is coming to you, I think an important part of the work-life fit or integration for companies when you're doing it, and you sort of, both of you have spoken to this point, is that our needs and our desires and what makes us happy and more fulfilled differs from person to person. And so, if you, you consult with companies on this particular, on making some of this work. Just talk about like how, I don't know if it's like how you convince companies or like how companies can work to make sure that when they're working on these programs that they're actually like taking into consideration people's individual needs.
Yeah, and I think our experience at CECP was just to create those guardrails. And again, we didn't make any changes to the employee handbook, but we instead, it's a 3-page document. It's just some suggestions and examples of work from home or flexible start time. And we also put those guidelines in there of put your availability in Outlook, make sure you have the technology at home. If you're going to work from home, you need to have internet. I mean, just sort of the basics, but just to lay it all out so that we know what our expectations are. And if you can't reliably be on a phone call at home because maybe you want to work from Starbucks all the time, maybe that's not going to work. So we laid out the guardrails, and then the manager checks in. And it's something that for my team specifically, we have a weekly check-in, and part of on our agenda for our meetings is how's work-life fit going. And something Callie taught us too was our consultant. You can make tweaks. You can forgive yourself if you can't do something one week. It's okay. Be flexible with yourself too. So we always talk about tweaks. Are there tweaks to your schedule? Or are there tweaks to is there something going on, you don't have to be too personal, but is something going on in your life this week that the team can pick up the slack for? So we just, we talk about it at that level. And, I think for our companies, they want very specific things to help measure. And as I mentioned before, that relationship impact and growth, there are 3 questions that managers have been putting into annual reviews or quarterly reviews to talk about how are your relationships? Do you feel like you're a part of a team? Do you trust people? Do they trust you? Do you feel like you're making an impact? Do you know how your job ladders up to the mission of this organization? Do you feel like you're making a difference at this company? And then growth. Do you know what opportunities are available to you? And it doesn't have to be a ladder. It can be a lattice. Do you want to switch business units? Do you want to try a different? Do you want to do a secondment? So just understanding that they know the path, and that, and then it's the manager's responsibility and senior leadership to help with the relationships, to help with the impact, to help with the growth. But again, it's up to the individual person. So I think the relationships, impact, and growth has been a good metric and a good way for our companies, something concrete to track and to say we're talking to our employees about their levels of fulfillment. And if they're low, I mean, this is something that you can do sort of on a 5-point scale. If they're low, the group we worked with, Imperative, has what they call job hacks. If you're low on any of those things, they have suggestions. Like obviously for relationships, you can try to find a mentor or find a coach. Right. If you don't know impact, if you don't understand your impact, try doing some mapping of your goals to the mission of the organization. And for growth, where do you want to be in 3 to 5 years? Have you thought through that? And who do you need to talk to at the company to find out what those growth opportunities are?
Okay, fantastic. We have a question.
Thank you. I've been reading a lot more about the perils of multitasking, that it really is a myth of productivity, that it's actually counterproductive. And I've been holding myself accountable with my own use of addiction to technology. And so when someone comes into my office, turning away from the screen, making sure my phone's down, and to give them the attention, unfortunately, I'm not getting that back all the time. And then also at meetings, not bringing my phone to meetings. If I'm presenting, asking people to put their technology down and be present in the moment, not necessarily asking them to do a little bit of meditation and breathing. But have you been incorporating these studies around the overuse of technology, the extreme, or the fact that multitasking really is not productive, and getting people to be present in the moment, into the conversation?
Yes, we've certainly shared that. You're actually 40% less productive, and try it. Basically, if you do 2 or more cognitive tasks at the same time, it stresses your brain out. And it's a cost of task switching. So stopping one thing and doing another, each time you do that, you're adding time. And your brain is expending more energy. And there's a very simple exercise. There are many out there on the internet that can really bring that to life for you. I won't do it now in the interest of time, but it won me over. Done. I'm not multitasking. The quality of your effort declines rapidly. The errors increase tremendously, and you're actually physically stressed too when you multitask. So the next time when you multitask, notice your breathing, notice your heart rate, notice if you're beginning to sweat at your palms. Honestly, you may not have thought about this, but the next time you multitask, think about how happy you feel. You're probably not your happiest. So yes, we have shared that. Of course, old habits die hard, so we need reminding. So culture change takes, 7 to 10 years or so, and we're 18 months in, so there are still a lot of people walking around just like this. But we're trying. We're trying to encourage people, and some people don't even think to put their phone away 30 minutes before sleep, or put it away while you're on the subway when there's no service anyway. So we try to share it as much as we can. Yeah.
Another question?
I was wondering if you could share or give advice about how to cascade those initiatives and goals from the top leadership or human resources down to the line managers so that they will allow and incorporate the work-life fit into their relationships with their direct reports.
Mm-hmm. So how we did it was that it became a firm-wide people priority. So because leadership believed in it. And I didn't share the whole evolution of flexibility, but at PwC at least, well-being, the topic of well-being has been formally shared in classrooms at our partner level, so our most senior level, as well as at our senior associate level. So that's the first time they get promoted. So around 3 to 4 years into their career, they have this training and they learn about well-being and the importance of well-being. And then outside of those 2 groups, the rest of us didn't get any formal training. And so what we found from the success of those programs was that this was great, this was invaluable, I've changed my life, but it's so hard to implement because when I get back to work, it's life as usual or business as usual, and no one else around me went to the training, so they're all doing their own thing. And it's really hard to change when you're on your own. So the feedback from that was compelling enough for leadership to make it a firm-wide priority. Which meant that it was in every firm-wide communication, it was in every firm-wide town hall. Tim Ryan, our chairman, would talk about it. There's signs everywhere. Hashtag Be Well, Work Well is everywhere. So we used that angle to keep it front of mind. We did things like the habit challenge, a firm-wide habit challenge, and we dangled some decent prizes to get people enthusiastic. Our organization has about 50-odd thousand people in the US. We had 50,000 people register in this challenge. And the importance of the top-down, I don't want to discount, but I also don't want to discount the importance of the microculture on your immediate team. Because one thing I think is a common misconception is this has to be some big elaborate thing, and it doesn't. It can be as simple as, like Sarah said, you could just agree with your teammates what you all want to do. Your boss doesn't even need to know, because you're all going to keep each other accountable and support each other. Your clients don't need to know. Rumbi mentioned I'm a yoga instructor, and I did that as a treat to myself because what I didn't share was I think I got close to burnout, to be candid. I'd come home from a work trip. I got home at around 9 p.m. My mum was visiting from Australia. She had cooked me dinner, and it was waiting on the dining table. And I got home from the airport, slammed my bedroom door, and said, I can't eat right now, and I joined a call with a client. And I felt miserable, I felt sick to my stomach, and because I was such a horrible person to my mum who's flown all this way from Australia. And I just thought, this isn't acceptable, like this kind of behavior, which I did to myself. So I won't blame the profession, I won't blame the client, I accepted it on my own, right? So what I could have done and what I would do now is I would have said no to my client, can we talk about this tomorrow? Rather than, yes, let's talk about it right now. So what we've encouraged with the Habit Challenge is teams having that conversation, invite the partners, but they don't have to be part of it. Like, the partner doesn't need to worry if Susie likes to wake up at 10 a.m. on Fridays. Really, they don't need to know. I mean, as long as someone knows where Susie is, it's fine. What's the problem? Is what we're trying to encourage. So I just want to share that it doesn't need to be some elaborate thing that you write in paper and that's cemented in forever. Like Sarah said, you can flex, and you can, if it doesn't work out one week, try something else the next week. But what we really encourage is having that conversation with your teammates, and just maybe put a plan together. Maybe put a team calendar. On the same calendar that you put your deadlines in, put that Tommy wants to work from home on Monday afternoon. Put that Jill likes to work out at lunchtime. Rather than them making up excuses and hiding. We had stories of people going to the gym in secret. I mean, how ridiculous is that?
Right. I think one of the things that was mentioned this morning by Michelle, which might be helpful in this case, is, did she call it reverse mentoring? Where, because I think what happens sometimes in a firm, especially as firms get larger, is you have sort of policies at the partner level. The partners, for instance, you mentioned Tim Ryan might say, we're all about be well, work well. And you have the staff that are also all about be well, work well, but there might be sort of blocks in the middle where perhaps there is, because we talk about how hard habits are to change, a manager in the middle, right, who's not really about that life, where you might have to go to the gym in secret. Or might feel that that's what it might be. So perhaps the reverse mentoring is a way where sometimes some of these communications about whether or not policies that are enacted are really sort of in action. But I don't know if you have any other ways that or sort of thoughts about how individuals can sort of integrate the sort of as we say, sort of make it successful, because you might have firms, I think maybe people are at firms where they are touting sort of a commitment to something, but perhaps you're not necessarily feeling it, or maybe you just feel that it's not truly the culture.
Yeah, I would say the world has changed. You've seen many different movements. It started at the front lines of employees saying, no, we're not going to take it anymore. We want this out of our experience with this company. So we're telling companies, this is the world you're living in. Your town hall meetings can be live streamed just by somebody's iPhone. Your inter-company memos can be thrown all over social media. And individual experiences will be made public. So with that knowledge, what are you going to do about it? And it has to start at the very top levels of a CEO saying, this matters to me. Our employee fulfillment matters to me. The purpose of this organization, we're living in a world where we understand the health of our community is essential for our business. That includes fulfilled employees. So the CEO has to understand that. There should be a purpose statement at the very highest level of the company saying, this is what we believe in. And many companies are making that very public through advertisements and statements. We've seen a lot over the past couple of years. And then middle managers have to be trained on this. They have to, but again, put it in your KPIs and the middle manager will care. You've seen the reverse of this, where there were really just impossible goals to meet, and employees they cut corners to make them happen at a company, and it backfires on them. So middle managers, if they're trying to meet goals that are people related, they will make this a part of their work, because at the end of the day, they have to meet those goals and they have to think about the bottom line. And then I think create those opportunities for employees. There's things called employee resource groups at companies that they can join about causes they care about. From the book clubs to just make opportunities for them to be heard. Turn on the comments on your intranet so people can talk. Have town hall meetings. Just have that communication channel open and encourage that. And that you'll see if the problems start bubbling up, you'll see it before it happens. So I think it's just a new world, and this is the way business needs to operate.
Right. Go ahead.
Yeah, I suggest finding the good role models in your organization, again, regardless of what level they are, and celebrating what they do. So I often encourage people to lead in if they're introducing themselves at a conference or a training or a meeting, share what they do to be well, work well. One of the things that we started at PwC is a podcast series where I interview leaders who you may not expect to have a well-being story, but they share it. So one of my favorite stories I like to tell is he's the global head of alternative asset management. So not a woo-woo flower industry, not that any of them are, but he serves alternative hedge funds globally. And he's very respected, New York based. He's been a partner for probably 30 odd years. And he jokes that it was his coming out story when he shared that he meditated. And he just didn't think that was relevant or anything worth sharing with his peers, with his staff. And since he did that 18 months ago, we're all focused on mindfulness. And the number of partners and staff that came out of the woodworks asking him for more information, how do I do it, where do I go, has been incredible. So I think the power of the role model is really something that can't be discounted, because we've never had a reason to share what we do, I think, really, and as much as we do now. And I'm sure at all of your organizations, there's someone there that prioritizes their well-being or their life and fits it in a way that allows them to sustain it. They're probably the person that inspires you most in your organization. So find them and encourage them to share with others what they do. So that becomes the example of what success means, not the person that just runs himself into the ground.
Right. And I know we were earlier on, the session before this one was a session on sort of negotiation, and so perhaps it might be a thing to think about including when you're negotiating the terms of your promotion or even your employment, to factor your life into what you're asking for and what you're looking at as part of the package. As we're sort of winding down, I just wonder if there are any questions that I may have missed. If people have things to ask, I know I'm standing between the important lunch, and so I did notice when I met Cecilia, something that made me smile is she has a badge that says "Be kind." I think it's a very powerful reminder to not just be kind to others. I think what's really, really important, and what this session is and about why this is so important, is that we must always be very kind to ourselves. And being kind to ourselves, it's not just how I feel, but apparently science backs it up too, is something that'll make our workspaces, our workspaces better, but also the businesses that we work for and work in will also be better. I think it's sort of a really powerful case for how important this is, because we don't want to destroy ourselves in pursuit of a more profitable company. And so I really want to urge everyone here to look up the resources that are being mentioned by Sarah and Cecilia. Thank you very much for doing that. And I want to thank you both for being here. If you have parting words.
I think just working off of the be kind. I mean, life is short, and this affects our health. It affects our family's health. So if we don't take control of this and write our own guardrails, no one else will. It's up to us.
A shameless plug, because Rumby brought it up, we are driving random acts of kindness. So it could be paying for the coffee for the person behind you in line at your favorite coffee shop. It could be topping up the parking meter for the next person. But that's at pwc.com/share kindness. Would love for you all just to share that. The science is real. Just observing an act of kindness apparently generates the same positive emotions in us. But my parting words would be just to think about if the life you're living now is worth the price you're paying to live it, and what your true definition of success is.
Right.
And thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you.